Hello, fourth graders. Today we are back to read Chapter 10, Part 2 of the story Matilda. Yesterday, when I was reading to you, we learned that I think her name is Hortensina. I don't know. Some of these names are really odd in this book. She had put itching powder in Mrs. Trenchbull's underpants, and she had to go to the chokey, which was a very tightly spaced closet that had glass and nails on the inside and the outside of it. So today we're going to continue to read the rest of this chapter. Well, Hortensina said, a few days later during prayers, the Trenchbull suddenly started scratching herself like mad down below. Aha, I said to myself, here we go. She changed for Jim already. It was pretty wonderful to be sitting there watching it all and knowing that I was the only person in the whole school who realized exactly what was going on inside of Mrs. Trenchbull's pants. And I felt safe too. I knew I couldn't be caught. Then the scratching got worse. She couldn't stop. She must have thought she had a wasp's nest down there. And then right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, she leaped up and grabbed her bottom and rushed out of the room. Both Matilda and Lavender were enthralled. It was quite clear to them that they were at this moment standing in the presence of a master. Here was somebody who had brought the art of skullduggery to the highest point of perfection. Somebody, moreover, who was willing to risk life and limb in pursuit of her calling. They gazed in wonder at this goddess, and suddenly even the boil on her nose was no longer a blemish but a badge of courage. But how did she catch you that time? Lavender asked, breathless with wonder. She didn't, Hortensina said, but I got a day in the chokey just the same. Why? They both asked. The Trenchbull, Hortensina said, has a nasty habit of guessing. When she doesn't know who the culprit is, she makes a guess at it, and the trouble is she's often right. I was the prime suspect this time because of the golden syrup job, and although I knew she didn't have any proof, nothing I said made any difference. I kept shouting, how could I have done it, Miss Trenchbull? I didn't even know you kept any spare knickers at school. I don't even know what itching powder is. I've never heard of it. But the lying didn't help me in spite of the great performance I put on. The Trenchbull simply grabbed me by one ear and rushed me to the chokey at the double, and threw me inside and locked the door. That was my second all-day stretch. It was absolute torture. I was spiked and cut all over when I came out. It's like a war, Matilda said. You're darn right it's like a war, Hortensina cried, and the casualties are terrific. We are the Crusaders, the gallant army fighting for our lives with hardly any weapons at all, and the Trenchbull is the Prince of Darkness, the foul serpent, the fiery dragon with all the weapons at her command. It's a tough life. We all try to support each other. You can rely on us, Lavender said, making her height of 3 feet 2 inches stretch as tall as possible. No, I can't, Hortensina said. You're only shrimps, but you never know. We may find a use for you one day in some undercover job. Tell us just a little bit more about what she does, Matilda said. Please do. I mustn't frighten you before you've been here a week, Hortensina said. You won't, Lavender said. We may be small, but we're quite tough. Listen to this, then, Hortensina said. Only yesterday, the Trenchbull caught a boy called Julius Rotwinkle eating licorice all sorts during the scripture lesson, and she simply picked him up by one arm and flung him clear out of the open classroom window. Our classroom is 1 floor up, and we saw Julius Rotwinkler go sailing out over the garden like a frisbee and landed with a thump in the middle of the lettuces. Then the Trenchbull turned to us and said, From now on, anybody caught eating in class goes straight out the window. Did this Julius Rotwinkle break any bones? Lavender asked. Only a few, Hortensina said. You've got to remember that the Trenchbull once threw the hammer for Britain in the Olympics, so she's very proud of her right arm. What's throwing the hammer? Lavender asked. The hammer, Hortensina said, is actually a ruddy great cannonball on the end of a long bit of wire, and the thrower whisks it around and around his or her hand faster and faster and then lets it go. You have to be terrifically strong. The Trenchbull will throw anything around just to keep her arm in, especially children. Good heavens, Lavender said. I once heard her say, Hortensina went on, that a large boy is about the same weight as an Olympic hammer, and therefore he's very useful for practicing with. At that point, something strange happened. The playground, which up to then had been filled with shrieks and the shouting of children at play, all at once became silent as the grave. Watch out, Hortensina whispered. Matilda and Lavender glanced round and saw the gigantic figure of Miss Trenchbull advancing through the crowd of boys and girls with menacing strides. The children drew back hastily to let her through, and her progress across the asphalt was like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. A formidable figure she was, too, in her belted smock and green breeches. Below the knees, her calf muscles stood out like grapefruits inside her stockings. "Amanda Thrip!" she was shouting. "You, Amanda Thrip, come here!" "Hold your hats," Hortensina whispered. "What's going to happen?" Lavender whispered back. "That idiot Amanda," Hortensina said, "has let her long hair grow even longer during the hauls, and her mother has, I think it's plaited it to pigtails. Silly thing to do." "Why silly?" Matilda asked. "If there's one thing the Trenchbull can't stand, it's pigtails," Hortensina said. Matilda and Lavender saw the giant in green breeches advancing upon a girl of about 10 who had a pair of plaited golden pigtails hanging over her shoulders. Each pigtail had a blue satin bow on the end of it, and it looked very pretty. The girl wearing the pigtails, Amanda Thrip, stood quite still watching the advancing giant, and the expression on her face was one that you might find of the person who is trapped in a small field with an enraged bull which is charging flat out towards her. The girl was glued to the spot, terrorized, pop-eyed, quivering, knowing for certain that the day of judgment had come for her at last. Miss Trenchbull had now reached the victim and stood towering over her. "I want those filthy pigtails off before you come back to school tomorrow," she barked. "Chop 'em off or throw 'em in the dustbin. You understand?" Amanda, paralyzed with fright, managed to sputter, "My mommy likes them. She plates them for me every morning." "Your mommy's a twit," the Trenchbull bellowed. She pointed a finger the size of a salami at the child's head and shouted, "You look like a rat with the tail coming out of its head." "My mommy thinks I look lovely, Miss Trenchbull," Amanda stuttered. "I don't give a tinker's toot what your mommy thinks," the Trenchbull yelled, and with that she lunged forward and grabbed a hold of Amanda's pigtails in her right fist and lifted the girl clear off the ground. Then she started swinging her round and round her head faster and faster, and Amanda was screaming blue murder, and the Trenchbull was yelling, "I'll give you pigtails, you little rat!" "Shades of the Olympics," Hortensina murmured. She's getting up speed now, just like she does with the hammer. 10-1 she's going to throw her. And now the Trenchbull was leaning back against the weight of the whirling girl and pivoting on her toes, spinning round and round, and soon Amanda Thrip was traveling so fast she became a blur, and suddenly, with a mighty grunt, the Trenchbull let go of the pigtails, and Amanda went sailing like a rocket right over the wire fence of the playground and high up into the sky. "Well thrown, sir," somebody shouted from across the playground. And Matilda, who was mesmerized by the whole crazy affair, saw Amanda Thrip descending in a long, graceful parabola onto the playing field beyond. She landed on the grass and bounced 3 times and finally came to rest. Then, amazingly, she sat up. She looked a little trifle dazed, and who could blame her? But after a minute or so, she was on her feet again and tottering back towards the playground. The Trenchbull stood in the playground dusting off her hands. "Not bad," she said, "considering I'm not in strict training. Not bad at all." Then she strode away. "She's mad," Hortensina said. "But don't the parents complain?" Matilda asked. "Would yours?" Hortensina asked. "I know mine wouldn't. She treats the mothers and fathers just the same as the children, and they're all scared to death of her. I'll be seeing you sometime, you two." And with that, she sauntered away. So, obviously, this story is fake. It's fiction. It's made up. It would never happen. If a principal or the headmaster ever did that, they would be fired. It would never, ever happen. So we can imagine, though, what that would have looked like. And this was a picture of the Trenchbull, Miss Trenchbull, winding up and throwing the girl with the pigtails across the field. And this would have been her landing. I haven't shown you all the pictures just because that would take a lot of time. All right, tomorrow we'll read the story called Bruce Bachtrocker and the Cake. We'll see you then.